Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the DFS Army Killshot podcast. I'm Kyle Marley, and with me this week is Paul Shaughnessy, AKA Paul Shag, from the Dogger Pass podcast. And we're going to break down this UFC 278 card for you guys today. Paul and I go way back. He was actually on the first podcast I ever did a long time ago with Best Fight Picks. And I think I was one of the first guests to appear on the Dogger Pass podcast as well, many years ago. But it's been a long time. I'm excited to talk to him about these fights today. How you doing? Thank you for coming on the show. And how you feeling about this pay-per-view, Paul?
I mean, I feel like the entire card is just like, I am not a quote-unquote, it's not my style. I like playing like, underdogs. That just seems to be how I play better. It's like, well, if I start making 4-leg parlays that pay like close to even or like plus 150, it's just like, I feel like I'm cursed on it. It just never really works out for me. So this card is like, I think all of the favorites should be favorites, but like some of these lines are so absurd that it's like, kind of looks like a damage control type of spot for me this week, where it's like I take a few shots. I have a few props that I have in right now. I'll be adding a couple like wide money lines as the steam chasers, the parlay boys, like ratchet some of this stuff up. But like, I mean, minus like 1,000 for Tyson Pedro. It's just like that's great, but like, how often do you think he wins the fight? Like, maybe it's 90%. Maybe it's even, if it's 95, I suppose there's quote unquote value. It's just like, it's really hard to make money off of that. So I don't love it, but like, with these pay-per-views, the odds are out so far in advance. The markets are so much more, saturated. There's so many more people breaking down fights and doing what we're doing right now that, it's changed a lot. So this looks like a sit back on your hands. Don't get too greedy too early and pick off some dog shots to me. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'll fall flat on my face. The good thing about betting like long shot props and underdogs is like you lose less money if you're completely dead wrong, and it doesn't take much to catch back up. Like last week was pretty good. Hit Cachoeira, hit Nina Nunes, hit Landwehr by decision plus 700. Yeah, just by hitting those three things and did some good stuff in live, all of a sudden you're way ahead on the week. So that's kind of my style. It's not for everybody. I get all the time, people being like, man, this person's going to absolutely get starts. It's just like, I know that's probably what's going to happen. But does it happen 95% of the time? Does it do that type of thing? Sorry for the phone ringing in the background. My mom's new to the production game. She doesn't. I had to pick her up from the airport today, so ringers off is always the rule. I feel like I'm rambling right now. You just said what's up, and I talked a little bit too much. But
No, you're good, man. Happy to have you on. And I mean, I for one can't wait to pay $70 for Nan versus Pudilova, and then next we got Harry Hunsucker. So this is my type of card. I love to eat the chalk on DraftKings. So I don't really have many hot takes this week. I'm excited to see if you do. But let's get right into it. Let's break down this card.
Let's do it.
We got first fight on the card. We got Victor Altamirano minus 165 against Daniel Da Silva plus 140, also known as Daniel Lacerda. So you call him whatever you want in this one. But on DraftKings, I like my curtain jerkers. Last week was one where I was not high on at all, and I just really lucked out with it being a draw. Like, it couldn't work out any better for me having a fight that I fade and it goes to a draw. But if that happens to me this week, I'll be in some trouble because I do like this one. We got Daniel Da Silva, who is just a kill or be killed fighter. He's got 11 wins. All 11 wins are inside the distance. All of his losses are finishes as well. And he's never even been to the third round. So I like to target those kill or be killed fights. And it's not really the same on the Altamirano side. He's not really, a great finisher. He's not getting finished a lot, but he's a guy who will fight hard for 15 minutes. And on the Contender Series, he put up 100 significant strikes. I believe 178 total strikes, had 4 takedowns in there. So this guy can score well over the course of 3 rounds, especially if this Da Silva guy is going to start gassing out late in the fight. But how do you see this fight going down, and which side do you prefer on DraftKings?
On DraftKings, I think I still prefer the Victor Altamirano So yeah, as you said, Daniel De Silva, kind of a a finish or bust, early finish or bust. I'm not confident that he can fight for a full 15 minutes. I am confident that Altamirano can fight for 15 minutes. I don't think he's excellent really at anything, but he's a little bit more of like a jack of all trades. Mixes in the wrestling. Seems like his submission defense is good enough that maybe like keep the fight standing early on in this fight. Don't get caught in something silly when you're both dry. But as the fight goes on, you get into round 2, round 3. I feel like he'll take over. I think he's probably a decent DraftKings play. Like he does have some takedown upside, and yeah, 100 significant strikes plus finish upside because, as I said, Daniel Lacerda, I'm not confident he can go full 15. So I like Altamirano. I have no idea about ownership. Is Altamirano going to be chalk? Like I feel like Daniel Da Silva is probably going to be a pretty popular underdog play, just considering like his finish ability. That he has in fights. I do like targeting these early fights as well for DraftKings because more casual people, they ain't tuning in for Victor Altamirano versus Daniel Da Silva. So just naturally, you're going to have less ownership on these types of plays. Like I would be probably surprised by more than 20% or so on either one of these guys.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I have give or take 2 or 3% around that 20% on both guys. But I went and picked Daniel Da Silva in this one just because I'm not a big Altamirano guy. I just don't think he's very good. I think it's more of he's a hard worker. He'll go out there, fight for 15 minutes. I like that about him a lot more than Da Silva. But the flashes that I saw from Da Silva were more impressive to me. I think he's the more dangerous fighter in this fight, especially early. And if he wins, I feel like it's going to come in the first half of the fight, and that is what's going to score really well on DraftKings. It's not a confident pick in this guy at all. It was kind of my DraftKings brain talking to me like, if this guy wins, he's going to score really well. So I ended up picking him for that reason, and it was just more of a dog or pass line for me. So I like Da Silva in this one, but at the same time, if he doesn't get a finish in the first round or early second round, I feel like Altamirano can really come back and put it on him and score well himself. So I like both guys. I'm cool going overweight to the field on both sides, but I'm not picking many underdogs on this card. So I feel like I'm going to end up being overweight to the Da Silva side. And there's so many favorites that I do like that might end up putting me a little underweight to Altamirano. But overall, I think this is a good fight to target in GPPs. We got minus 250 that the fight doesn't go the decision, plus 120 inside the distance for Altamirano. That's really good. And as you mentioned, people aren't tuning in for this fight, so they're probably not going to make it a point to get it in their DraftKings lineups. I do think it goes a little bit overlooked, and I like that about it as well.
Yeah, I may get greasy with like an Altamirano round 3. It's only like plus 900. They're pretty wise to it. They know that like if this gets extended into round 3, Altamirano probably takes over, maybe gets the finish.
Yeah, I don't hate that line.
I would need I mean, with those like round 3 props, it's like I rarely ever touch them unless I'm getting like over 10 to 1.
Yeah, I like to target guys I think that are going to gas out. And I mean, Da Silva fits the build, so I'm not against it. But at the same time, if Altamirano is going to cash a round 3 ticket, I think he's going to score really well on DraftKings as well. So might just be getting my exposure there instead. Because I wouldn't shock me to see him put him out in round 2 or get the decision win either. I feel like he's got a lot of paths on this one.
I wouldn't be shocked by, this is the first time that, because, we haven't really seen any sort of finishing ability from Altamirano. He seems to go the 15-minute distance pretty much all the time. Daniel Da Silva, I mean, if you have to figure, I mean, this is always a problem that people run into is like, rational, like game planning from fighters. Like you would think based on like how things have went in the UFC for Daniel Da Silva, that guy is like on the treadmill, going for hikes up in the mountains, like working on that cardio. But we say these things and then they just show up and you're the exact same dude as before.
When I try and play coach and like
Altamirano win by decision. Altamirano decision. Yeah. I mean, it's a tricky one. We'll see what weigh-ins do and if I end up on it. But on DraftKings, I'm going to be playing Altamirano myself.
Solid. I like it. And I don't even remember what I was about to just say. I wasn't too important though, so we'll move on. Next fight on the card, we got another one that I sort of like to target. We got Aori Qui Lang minus 145 against Jay Perrin plus 125. The odds have been moving in Perrin's favor all week long, and I think that's going to make him somewhat of a popular underdog on DraftKings this week, and maybe it makes Qui Lang a little bit underowned. But I feel like the power side, the high pace striking side would be on the Qui Lang side, and he scored 67 points in his UFC debut loss. If he ended up getting that win, that would have been 97 points in a decision, which is really good. And then in his last fight, he got a first round knockout up at 135 pounds, where this fight's going to be, and he scored 125 points. If you do that, you're going to break the slate. But at the same time, this Jay Perrin guy, I don't think he's very good. I don't think he's great anywhere, but he's a solid wrestler. I liked some of his takedowns in his UFC debut fight, and I think he can go hard for 15 minutes, where maybe we see Qui Lang slow down towards the end. He'll fight through it, but I feel like towards the end of this fight, it could be a lot more favorable on the Perrin side. But how do you see it going down?
I mean, on DraftKings, I think Perrin is such an obvious play at 7,700. Mario Bautista is a very, very good fighter, and he held his own in that spot. I mean, he got taken down 4 times, but got 2 takedowns of his own. His Contender Series fight landed a whole bunch of takedowns. Qui Lang at 125 pounds. This fight is at 135. He was taken down 5 times by Cody Durden. So I imagine, Jay Perrin putting in time with Aljamain Sterling, putting in time with Merab Dvalishvili. It's like they have a game plan here, and the game plan is going to be to don't stand and bang with the guy named the Mongolian Murderer. Seems pretty straightforward to me. I think Perrin, very obvious play, probably like 30% on DraftKings. But I mean, I never know what I don't do my own ownership projections or anything like that. I don't subscribe to any ownership projections. Maybe I should check out the DFS Army projections on that front. But Perrin seems like an obvious play. He's in my lineups. I only usually make like 3 lineups, and I think it's really hard for me, like, finding dogs that I like this week. So I'm just eating the chalk. I think he gets a lot of takedowns. He sticks to that game plan. Probably go the full 15 minutes, but 7,700. It's like if this guy scores 90, he could end up on an optimal. So, like him, I feel like I missed the boat on like the actual betting line. Like, obviously we opened at plus 250, but there's only a handful of people who actually bet that line. Despite what you may see on Twitter sometimes, like everybody's like, "Oh, I got the plus 250 tickets." Like, no. I feel like, plus 150 was looking good. Like, I think it's probably close to a 50-50 fight. I don't mind Qui Lang. I think he's like a real warrior, like decent volume, great durability. But yeah, cheap wrestler. It's a really easy spot for a card that I find it hard to be like feel really good about too many of the underdogs. Jay Perrin's a pretty easy guy to lock in this week, I think.
Yeah, I have him as, let's see here, 20. No, that's not him. What is it? 31%. So yeah, one of the higher owned underdogs on the card, and it's a lot to do with that line shifting in his favor. All the people doing 150 lineups are going to see that, and they're going to try and load up on that.
Sure.
But at the same time, I mean, if that's going to put Qui Lang a lot lower on than all these other people, to be honest, that makes Qui Lang my preferred GPP play. I don't know how much leverage I want to get on Perrin if he's going to be 30% owned on this card. I'm fine, matching the field, going around that 30%, but I'm not trying to get 10% leverage on Perrin because I just don't see any ways he breaks the slate. I do think he can have a lot of wrestling success. He had 2 good takedowns, I believe it was 2 takedowns in his last fight, and I thought they looked solid, but it was more so Bautista beating him to his own game, where I don't think Aori Qui Lang is going to have that type of game plan in this one. I think Qui Lang will want to keep this one on the feet, probably hunt for the knockout. But this guy's been in a lot of exciting fights. He can bring a high pace, and I think that high pace will also help out the Perrin side because he's going to have to fight at a high pace as well to match it if he wants to get the win here. So definitely an underdog I'm okay targeting in all formats. He's like plus 850 inside, plus 800. Oh no, that's by submission, plus 400 inside the distance. So I feel like we're not going to get a knockout or a submission that breaks the slate, but he could go out there and win a decision and still score over 10x, and that's always cool with me with underdogs. So
yeah, you need him to like at least get like 4 to like 6 takedowns. Like you need to wrestle heavy, holding top position, gain all that control time points and stuff like that. Like, but at 7,700, you can definitely get there. But I understand like from if he's actually 31% on fight night, like, you know, especially in like high stakes, like everybody's gonna have that guy.
Yeah. And it's more so the ownership that makes Qui Lang my preferred GPP play. That is, Perrin is my preferred cash game play because this fight is expected to go 3 rounds. And even in a loss, Perrin can score 30, 40 points in this fight, which isn't going to kill your cash game lineup. I'm totally okay with that. But not a fight I'm going to make a point to get into my GPP lineups. I'm okay getting a little bit of leverage just as an ownership play to Qui Lang. And then I have to use some Perrin in all formats just because it makes too much sense not to. I just don't see me getting any leverage there.
Yep, that makes sense.
Next one on the card, we got Amir Albazi minus 435 against Francisco Figuereto plus 350. I mean, I think this is kind of a squash match for Albazi. I don't see any advantages in this fight for Figuereto, and I kind of see it as a submission or bust type of fight for him to get the win. But not only to get the win, I think that's the only way he can score well on DraftKings. Maybe he can land a big shot on the feet, get the knockout, but I think that's way less likely than a submission is. And I favor Albazi on the feet. I favor him in the knockout power. I favor him in the wrestling. I favor him in the grappling. So this is clear Albazi for the pick, but he's priced up so high where there's a lot of favorites on this card that have high ceilings. I don't love him on DraftKings. We did see him get a first-round submission against Malcolm Gordon, only scored 97 DraftKings points. That's probably not going to get it done, to be honest, on this card. So we need some more action from him before that finish, or just a really dominant wrestling performance for him to score high in a decision. At the same time, I do have him lower owned than those other high-ceiling guys. So if you want to use him for an ownership play, I think that makes sense. But I kind of just like him for cash games because to me, he seems like a safe play. We don't have to have 100 plus from him in cash. So I'm cool with him there, but I probably won't get much of this fight in GPPs. And I'm just going to all out fade Figueredo and hope that submission does not come. But how you feeling about it?
A lot of the same sentiments, basically. I think he's kind of wide, a little bit more too wide to have any sort of interest from a betting perspective. I see, the first round sub potential, but it's like, man, when you've got Usman and Romanov cheaper than him, Usman, five round Usman in a fight that you think it's not like the Covington fights, and he still scored well in the Covington fights. It's like, this is a fight where the game plan will probably be like, take this guy down take down Leon Edwards every single round. It's just like, Usman's right below him, has like 150 point upside. I don't really know unless you have some sort of insane situation where there's like 3 knockdowns by Albazi, and you know what I mean? It's like the upside for Albazi just doesn't match it. And I could see it, becoming like more like the Zalgas fight. Figueredo, I think gets control, gets taken down, maybe submitted, but I'm not getting there. I only do 3 lineups, so not spending anything on Albazi. I think Albazi wins, but he's like minus 500 on the betting line. I just can't really get there. A little bit too juiced, but I have no interest in bad Figgy on the other side. Like I'm never. I lost money, fading him in his last time out against Lacerda, who I was like, oh, Lacerda may be able to get him out of there. I was wrong. He got him out of there just so quickly.
Yeah, that one hurt me as well. I didn't have any Figgy that night.
I'm not a bad Figgy guy. Won't be touching this with a 10-foot pole really on either side. Like, is there even any props on Albazi that are worth mentioning? Like, I feel like his submission prop is probably priced about right. We were talking about it yesterday on the Dog or Pass podcast. I mean, there's a couple books out there. I think, yes, Albazi by submission plus 480 is available out there at a couple books. That's not bad. I mean, Dave Mason's got it at plus 285, so that's probably not too bad of a look. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, outside of the Albazi at a wide prop, not much interest for me.
Yeah, I feel you. And you mentioned his ceiling. Like he could go out there and get a 60-second finish, get that 25-point bonus, have a minimum of 125 points, and he still might get outscored by guys like Usman. So yeah, I think just on paper, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to go Albazi on DraftKings. Maybe it's just a good fight to fade. Hope that he wins a decision and scores 80 points or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Next one on the card, we got AJ Fletcher minus 155 against Lusa plus 135. So I picked Lusa in this one. I think he can have some success stuffing takedowns and just win a striking match here, but I don't see any ceiling for him unless he's able to get a knockout, which I'm not predicting. And I think that the ceiling is on the Fletcher side because he is a really good wrestler. And he scored 64 points in a loss in his UFC debut. If you give him a win there, that's 94 points. And if he's going to actually win, he probably has even more success. So I think this guy has 100+ point upside, even in the decision win. And even though I'm picking against him, he might be my preferred play on DraftKings just for that reason. But how do you see the fight playing out?
My biggest question, and I haven't really found the answer for it, is like, how good is Lusa's takedown defense? I think it's pretty good, but I haven't like seen him against somebody who's like an elite wrestler and like exploit that. I picked AJ Fletcher against Semmelsberger, but I had like plus 205 there. I thought that line was wide. That came down to just a super, super razor close decision. You know, one of those bets that you lose, but I felt pretty good about it. I think Fletcher's pretty solid prospect. Kid's only 25 years old. You know, he's got the football background, so it's not like he's like a collegiate wrestler or anything like that. I think he's got potential, but like, if Lusa keeps this fight on the feet, I don't think is remotely competitive. Like outside of like a knockout for Fletcher, Lusa just picks him apart. I think this fight goes 15 minutes. The real question comes down to how often can AJ Fletcher mix in takedowns and get the fight to the mat. I think it's dog or pass from a betting perspective. Fletcher, I suppose if he was like low owned, with the game plan of with either, you know, the path to victory being a early knockout or like, you know, getting a bunch of takedowns, he's probably my preferred play on DraftKings. But yeah, like Lusa, he's a stand-up guy. I can't see him getting much more than like 80 to 85 to 90 significant strikes. That's like the high range. Like I would expect more around in a winning performance. Like, you know, he stuffs takedowns, gets like 70 significant strikes, doesn't get any takedowns, scores like, you know, 60 points in a win. Like I think he's a horrible DraftKings play. I'm picking him to win, but slight margins, and it has to do with the fact that he's like a plus 130 underdog. That's really all it is.
Yeah, he landed 88 significant strikes in a striking match against Lazez.
Exactly.
And in this fight, he'll probably be spending a lot of time stuffing takedowns or on his back trying to get up. He's not going to be scoring during those moments. So I feel like 88 is almost a good ceiling for his significant strikes in this one, unless Fletcher really slows down in the fight and Lusa can put it on him on the feet. But I agree. I just don't see much of a ceiling for Lusa, and I would rather target higher ceilings, even if I'm not picking them to win like I am Lusa. So I feel like Lusa is a solid cash game play, hoping that he can go 3 rounds and maybe win it. But my preferred GPP play is going to be the guy that I'm picking to lose, and that's AJ Fletcher, just for his wrestling upside. Next one on the card, we got a rematch. Miranda Maverick minus 600 against Shayna Young plus 450. I believe it was like 2019 when these two fought in Invicta, I think, and Maverick took her down and got a rear naked choke in the first round. So she would have scored, 100+ points if that happens again here. She scored 110 points in her 2 finishes in the UFC as well. And I just feel like her big edge in this fight is going to be on the ground. If you want to clearly win this fight like a minus 600, it's got to be through the ground. You don't want to go out there and test your striking against Shayna Young. She could probably win the striking match as well, but she probably won't look like a minus 600. And she definitely is not going to score enough to pay off a $9,300 price tag. So I would want to be certain that she's going for takedowns early and often in this one to pay 9,300 for her. But I do have her lower owned than the other 9K range. So I think for ownership reasons, she makes sense in this fight. How do you see it playing out, though?
Yeah, I think if you're playing like lots of lineups, like if you're playing, if you're maxing out, 20 max or above, like if you're doing 150, of course, like you should get above on Miranda Maverick. Like she has very, very high likelihood of outscoring like Romanov. Usman's going to be, Usman's just kind of like he's going to be like 60, 70% up. He's got to be. And probably rightfully so. Wrestler, 5-round fight. Got 5-6 takedowns against Leon Edwards, first time that they fought. But yeah, Maverick could be like that overlooked because nobody can afford her up top. And yeah, she's already beaten this girl in one round. It was a 1-round fight, but she got it done in that first round. From a betting perspective, I'm such a sick pup that I'm like, maybe could be some value if this fight gets extended. If Maverick decides, hey, let's work on our hands on later in the week, scooping up a crazy plus the way the number's moving right now, it's already plus 485 out there is available. Maybe you get a plus 600 Shayna Young and MMA be MMA, something crazy happens, or Maverick decides to just strike and it's way more competitive. But I think Miranda Maverick for GPP is probably a really good, a good ownership play with first round finish upside, takedown, fish for a submission. That's her easiest path to victory. It's whether she's let's test our hands for round 1 and then, approach the takedown in round 2. She's not an elite wrestler who always leans on it, but if you've already done it, go out there, collect your 2 paychecks, get the job done early. Miranda Maverick makes a lot of sense as a GPP play. I would not play Shayna Young on DraftKings because, I guess her last fight out there against Gina Mazan, that's the upside. That is her upside in any sort of fight, and that's a 2nd-round finish. Maverick has been the distance with much, much better opponents. And what did Shayna Young? Shayna Young scored a 2nd-round finish, and what was her final DraftKings points out against Mazzani? I'm trying to look it up right now. Sorry.
Yeah, I know she definitely killed me that night because I didn't have any Shayna Young.
Oh yeah, I had no faith in her whatsoever. I did not bet Mazzani. I'm 99. If she got a 2nd-round finish against Maverick, then of course she ends up being optimal. But Maverick's been in there, went the distance against Blanchfield.
I don't even really think that's in play.
This is a considerable step down in competition for her. She should absolutely roll.
Yeah, agreed. We got plus 825 inside the distance for Shayna Young. So I really don't even think that the knockout's in play for her. She's going to be an easy X out of my player pool. Just make this an easier slate to have one less fighter on it. And I'll have a couple more as we move along here. But Shayna Young's an easy fade for me. If she does get a 2nd-round TKO, then so be it. I just won't win. But I doubt that happens. And I do think Maverick makes sense for ownership reasons in GPPs, just because she's sandwiched in between, Tyson Pedro and Usman and Romanov, a bunch of other people who could score really high as well. So for ownership reasons, I like her in GPPs. I also think she's a safe play, and we can use her in cash games as well, especially with that plus 825 inside the distance line for Young. Maverick should get 3 rounds to work with here. But if she does spin, just 1 round with no takedown attempts, that's probably going to kill us with a $9,300 price tag, to be honest. So we need a lot of wrestling, and ideally just the same thing that happened in their first fight. Get her out of there in the first round and score 95 plus.
Yeah, even last time out for her against Sabina Mazo, where it was hey, this is an opponent who's a good striker, horrible grappler. She didn't get the 1st-round finish, but 2nd-round finish got 110 points, 4 takedowns, 4 minutes of control time. It's like she may not be a submission whiz. Maybe she doesn't get the first round finish, but it's like rinse, repeat those takedowns. At 110 points would probably still be decent. May not be optimal, but would still be decent enough that like you're not pulling your hair out.
Yeah, if you told me she was going to score 110 points this week and she's going to be 20% owned, I'd definitely go overweight on that for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, next one on the card. We got Sean Woodson minus 340 against Luis Saldana plus 280. And this is one I don't love for DraftKings. I'd say it's my second or third least favorite fight on the card because Woodson's a high volume boxer. He's going to have a big boxing edge in this one. And just his volume is going to be hard for Saldana to match. I feel like it's going to be his punches versus Saldana's kicks. And neither guy's really likely to look for takedowns in this matchup, which is what I don't love. We're also expected to go the distance at minus 125. So I just have a hard time seeing a high score from either one of them if this fight does go to a decision. Neither one of them has scored well in a decision in the past. I think Saldana's had a 50-point decision, a 70-point decision, and Woodson's been in the 80s and the 60s. So like none of those are going to cut it. And we would probably need a finish from either side. But I don't see me wanting to get too much of the Woodson side because everyone that's priced around him. So he might be a fade for me, hoping that he doesn't get a finish. And then Saldana is in play as an underdog who could get the win, but I just don't see a big ceiling from him either unless he's able to get a finish. But how do you see it playing out?
You don't love it either. Yeah, the struggle with if he doesn't get a first round finish for Woodson, I find it really. I kind of think that Woodson probably gets him out of there like in round 3. But yeah, no real grappling upside, kind of a situation where maybe he has like 100 significant strikes, but Paulo Costa right below him has a very, very realistic chance of getting a first round knockout against, a very chinny Luke Rockhold, a very mad this week Luke Rockhold as well. Doesn't like those Nelk boys, I'll tell you. I find it really, really hard to justify getting Woodson into lineups for me. And Saldana, don't love him. Think he really fades down the stretch. This fight, he's only at 4,200 feet of altitude, but that isn't going to help all that much. And I think Saldana's kind of a guy who slows down the longer the fight goes in general. So fight I'm avoiding on DraftKings. Was considering a Woodson round 3 prop, waiting for more books to open up. But yeah, like the books are kind of wise to it. Another fight, you know me, I'm kind of greedy on these things. It's like I like those when I'm gonna play like round 3 props. I'm looking for like 10-1 or better. And one book. There's still 900s out there, and it's moved to. DraftKings Sportsbook has it at 10-1. I think that would be a decent little look. Woodson round 3, because another book just moved it to plus 575. So yeah, Bet Online just moved it to plus 575. I tend to find Bet Online's lines to be like mostly the sharpest out there. So Woodson round 3, 10-1, not a bad look if you have access to DraftKings Sportsbook.
Yeah, Evan in chat agrees with that. And yeah, I wasn't really thinking about that, but the fight is at altitude. Saldana slows down as it is. So, it definitely makes sense. I'm cool with that for sure. All right, let's go with next fight on the card. One I do like a lot for GPPs. We got Jared Gordon minus 265 against Leo Santos plus 225. And Santos is 42 years old now, so that's really the worry here. But I feel like all of his maybe all of his win equity comes in round 1 in this one because he'll come out of the gates hot. He's really good, a really good grappler, and he's shown to have solid TKO power as well in the past handful of years. And Gordon has somewhat weak chin. It would not shock me to see a Santos first round knockout or a first round submission in this fight. And if he can do that, then he's going to have a really good chance at the optimal lineup, probably a lock for the optimal lineup. So I have to target Santos just for that ceiling. But if Gordon can make it out of the first round, I feel like rounds 2 and rounds 3 are just going to be all Gordon, and he can really put it on Santos. He could probably put on a wrestling clinic. This guy has had, 135 points or so in DraftKings wins. He had 120 in a decision in one of his most recent wins. So I just like this fight on both sides of it. I think there's a good chance we can get a high score from either one of them. I'm going to pick Gordon to get the win. But Santos is going to be one of my favorite underdogs on the card to target. How do you say it going down?
I'm already on Santos inside the distance plus 500, Santos by submission plus 900. Gordon has been historically chinny. When he does get rattled sometimes too, it's like he always reverts to that wrestling, which is going to put himself in danger against someone like Santos who has BJJ skills. I think I really like the Santos side here, like quite a bit. And on top of that, it's like when they're, in the stand-up, Santos has a 7-inch reach advantage. Like the volume is going to be all Gordon, but it's like Gordon does his best work when he's like pursuing takedowns. And I think that's a dangerous proposition at least early in the fight. It's a dangerous proposition for him to be, chasing, trying to take Santos down and steal that first round. So I'm already on 2 props on Santos. He's 42 years old, so I am prepared to absolutely lose here. But I think it's a little bit wide. I think it's a bad matchup. Don't forget that like Jared Gordon used to be a 145 pounder. He actually prefers to fight at 145, but he missed weight a couple times, and the UFC just books him in lightweight fights. So he's undersized. He's giving up a lot of reach. If it goes to the mat, he's in danger. I just think, everything about it is kind of pointing towards a pretty live underdog in Leo Santos. So, I got Santos in DraftKings. I've got Santos props bets. I'm living and dying by a 42-year-old Brazilian dude who, he hasn't done anything spectacular in a while. I could totally see him getting grinded out in this fight. But, yeah, it's a dangerous fight for Jared Gordon. I've been a Jared Gordon supporter in a lot of spots, but, I feel like it's a bad matchup, and they've got him as, a plus 230 dog in some spots. So, pretty clear Santos for me is the side. I could not imagine getting to the Gordon side juiced up like that. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I would wait. If you like Gordon in this one, I would wait till after round 1 and just look for the live angle in that one, or around 3, something like that, to where you're hoping that Santos gasses out at 42 years of age, and Gordon can really mess him up. I feel like in the last half of the fight, even if he doesn't get a finish, I think he can score really well. So I'm cool going overweight to both sides of this fight, but as I mentioned, Santos will be one of my favorite underdogs on the card, and I would rather target a guy like Santos, who I'm picking to lose, but has 100+ upside, rather than a Lusa, who I'm picking to win, but probably scores 60 points in a decision. So give me the ceilings and GPPs.
That makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, going after that 200K, so got to do something crazy, right?
Yes, sir.
Lusa
is probably going to be low owned, and if out of nowhere somehow he gets a first round finish, then I guess it makes sense.
That's true. Maybe that's the craziness that I need. I don't know. Now you got the brain.
That may be too crazy. As I said multiple times in the show, I do 3 lineups. So it's I don't really get too off the wall too often.
Yeah. And I won't have many, for the 200K, I won't have a whole lot of lineups myself. I would say 10 or less. But if I make 150 lineups, I always put those in the mini max, just to try and improve my mass multi-entry game, because, I can try and see how these fights will play out, but manipulating an optimizer to do what I want it to do has just really not been my game. So I'm trying to get better at that. And I'm still waiting, for a solo takedown on one of these huge contests. So hopefully it'll be this week. We'll see. Next one on the card, we got Alexander Romanov minus 345 against Marcin Tybura plus 285. Romanov is what we like to target. It's just his style on DraftKings. Somebody who's going to go for takedowns early and just maul his opponent on the ground. He scored 110 or more DraftKings points in all 4 of his UFC finishes. And in the one fight where he didn't score well, it was against a really good grappler. So I feel like this is a great matchup for Romanov, not only to win, but to score well on DraftKings. It is heavyweights, though, so I think Tybura is in play for that early knockout shot, just in case he can land something big. But I'm much more on the Romanov side in all formats in this one. How do you see it going down?
It's an interesting one, to say the least. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, you haven't watched the Espino fight if you're confident in Romanov. But, like, the guy's lost 30 pounds since then. You know, creeping on the Instagram a little bit. Seems like he's going on, like, mountain hikes. And he's obviously changed his body composition. Is that going to make it a little bit more difficult to take guys down and just lay on top of them? It will. But, like, the guy's wrestling is super, super elite. His striking leaves a lot to be desired. I think I'm picking Romanov. I think he's going to get a whole bunch of takedowns. Marcin Tybura is probably going to have like 20 pounds on him on fight day, which could gas him out. Like, as we get a little bit deeper into the fight, if this gets into like the third round. I think Romanov is the side on DraftKings. And I think he wins, but I'm hesitant because, you know, of his current money line. Like, it's not like I feel like he's absolutely going to smash, get a first round finish. Yeah, he's still best price available out there right now is minus 325. So people have been taking themselves some Marcin Tybura. I think Tybura is a decent but not great wrestler. I think Espino is a much better wrestler than Marcin Tybura. And Romanov was, I mean, maybe because I'm a little bit skinnier than he was, at least then. Like, Romanov was a fat slob when he first showed up in the UFC. He just had, like, really good wrestling and was able to, you know, weight bully some guys. He's not going to be able to weight bully here, but I think he's making adjustments. He sees the Stipe Miocic's. He sees the John Jones out there. He sees that, like, you don't have to be 265 pounds to be successful at heavyweights. Like, if you're at least fleet of foot, able to move around in there, you can have a lot of success too. So I think Romanov wins. I think he's a good DraftKings play. I mean, he does have like 6-7 takedown upside. Don't know if I'm going to get there from a betting perspective this week. And I think on DraftKings, like, what's his ownership going to be this week? I don't have it off the top of my head. I think like Maverick's
55%.
55. Like, I think Maverick's a better play.
Yeah, half the ownership basically.
Half the ownership, and like, if I think there's a better likelihood of Maverick getting the first round finish than Romanov getting the first round finish. As crazy as that sounds.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, on paper, with Romanov being cheaper, I would prefer, you know, Romanov and save that $300 or whatever it is. But at the same time, at half the ownership, I totally understand a Maverick play in GPPs. I think that's a really good pivot if you're trying to get a 200K solo. I mean, if you got Romanov and he goes out there and puts up 110 points, well, I mean, half the field had him also. So you're still competing with all of them. You probably got Usman on your team. Half the field's going to have him as well. So you're just not leaving yourself many chances to get different. Whereas Maverick alone makes your lineup a little bit different. And I might even be high on the Maverick. I'm always a little bit higher on the upper range because I do these and then I'll figure out where I'm at and I'll have maybe 540% and you got to get 600%. So I'll spread out that other 60 or whatever it is. And it always comes around this top range. So I know I upped the Maverick for that reason. So it wouldn't shock me if I'm too high on her right there as well.
Maverick's round one odds are like around 60 or yeah. So she's like plus 245, plus 275. And Romanov round one is like plus 450. So it's like Maverick has, you know, much shorter odds to win a first round. I think, like, you know, now, like, I never usually know until I talk to you and you're showing me the, you know, these ownership projections. Like, I think Maverick, you know, Romanov doesn't outscore Maverick 2 times to 1.
Yeah, I'm definitely cool with that. And I'll have to talk to Fantasy Football Geek, see if we get you a membership over there. at DFS Army. I know he's a fan of Paul Shag, so I'm sure we could get you the hookup. But if you guys are not signed up yet, go sign up at dfsarmy.com. Use promo code Sleeveless. You'll save 10% every month you stick around. We got all the tools you need to crush the season of the NFL. All sports are included in the VIP membership. We got an awesome community on Discord as well. So sign up if you have not yet. Next one on the card, we got my least favorite fight and the pay-per-view opener. Lucy Pudilova minus 120 against Wu Yanan plus 100. And I'm just going to be short and sweet. I'm going to X both of them out of my player pool. Hope that we get a decision here and they don't score more than 80 or so points, and then I'll be happy with it. But I'm not trying to, not only am I not trying to use either one of them, but it's the mid-range fight of the week. It's right there in the mid-range anyways. And I always feel, a little bit sketched out going with one of the sides when maybe I could do both. Like if I went with Pudilova and then Wu Yanan ended up being on the optimal lineup, like that's going to take sleep away from me right there. So I'd rather just fade them both and not have to worry about that at all and hope that we get a bad score. And I expect that we do. So the way I got some investment to this fight was on DraftKings. The money line finish only prop has Wu Yanan at plus 100. And I think she should be favored in that situation. So that means if it goes to a decision, it's just a push. It doesn't even matter who wins. It's only graded if there's a finish. And 85% of Wu Yanan's wins have come inside the distance, where only 38% of Pudilova's wins are inside the distance. And Pudilova has also been finished multiple times. And I think Wu Yanan's only been finished once. So I don't understand that line. I feel like Wu Yanan should be like minus 150 or better, to be honest with you there. And I'm ultimately expecting that bet to push, but I just like where my line is on that, and I just don't want to get any exposure at all on DraftKings. I'll pick Wu Yanan because she's the underdog. I think it's a coin toss. I like her movement a little bit more, her all around, finishing game more, where it's just a jab that I'm only impressed with on the Pudilova side. But how do you see it playing out, and are you more interested in it on DraftKings?
No, God, no. I mean, I feel like this fight on pay-per-view is like a psyop. Like they moved Romanov down to be like, let's see how bad we can make. Like, let's see how much outrage there is out on, Twitter and social media.
Yeah, when you posted that, I thought that Romanov was out of the fight or something. I was like, what the hell is this all about?
It must have been like ESPN is like, dude, like, you got to give us something from that pay-per-view. Like, our promo guy doesn't know how to cut a feature because there's literally nothing like interesting on this prelims card. I mean, yeah, I don't have very much interest in this fight really at all. Maybe the Wu Yanan fight, if you have to slide her in, is like the last player on, like, because you were talking about maybe some finish upside. Pudilova's been finished a whole bunch of times. Maybe Wu Yanan, like, she's mixing some takedowns. She got a takedown against Mara Silva, who I think is a pretty solid fighter. Maybe Wu Yanan's been working on her wrestling a whole bunch, and that is the game plan for her. So because she's 7,900, if she's like the last woman or last fighter in to your lineups, I think that's a decent click. She should be way less owned than like a Jose Aldo. And I could see her outscoring a guy like Aldo. Like, it's not the way DraftKings scoring works. It's not so wild to foresee that happening. Aldo's more of like a precise striker. Lusa, we've already talked about, low volume guy. De Silva is like kind of your high end GPP guy. So it's like Wu Yanan could be like a lower owned type of fighter with some takedown upside, and not somebody I love, but maybe mix in if you have to.
Yeah, it would definitely be the Wu Yanan side that I'm looking to target if I was going to use this fight, but I would just rather make it easier on my optimizer and X them both out of there and hope to not worry about it, because I have a lot more interest in this other mid-range fight with Merab Dvalishvili minus 130 against Jose Aldo plus 110. I just think this is the most interesting fight on the card. But you go ahead, start it off with me. Start it off for me. How do you see this fight going down?
Pedro versus Harry Hunsucker.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit more interested in this fight, to be honest with you. But let's go ahead and do that one next. Since I
Oh,
already
sorry.
screwed
I
up
was
the
looking
opener.
at the order. Sorry, I was.
You're right. You're right. I just screwed it up. So let's go ahead and start with this better fight, anyways.
Oh, we're doing Merab versus Jose Aldo, right?
Yeah, and I'll go to Hunsucker next.
The real question with Merab versus Jose Aldo is like, it's such an interesting matchup because we don't really know. It's just like Merab needs to score takedowns. He historically isn't very good at holding top position, but the guy, they call him the machine for a reason. It's like he will go after it all fight long. It's like, although the most times he's ever been taken down in a fight was like the first time that he took on Frankie Edgar, he got taken down twice, I believe in a 5-round fight. So it's like, obviously it's really, really hard to take down Jose Aldo. He's fought some of the best wrestlers in his weight classes of all time. But I don't think he's really fought anybody like Merab, who is just so headstrong, very, very like ridiculously strong for the weight class. The guy's just like a mutant in that respect. Got good cardio. He's been rocked, but he's been able to hold it together and come back. I'm thinking of like the Marlon Moraes fight. I'm still going with Merab, but I think this is from a betting perspective, I think it's a much better fight to bet live. Like if Merab shoots in early on takedowns, gets like pushed off a couple times quick, like that may be the tail of the fight. I don't think he has much of a chance of going strike for strike with Jose Aldo over the course of 15 minutes. I think he loses that fight. Like he needs to be getting takedowns. He needs to be attacking takedowns early. I'm sure he'll probably be super, super popular on DraftKings. I think he's going to get on Prize Picks. I did over 2.5 takedowns. Don't love that prop, but I think for Merab, like 2.5 takedowns is like nothing. Like that's like a horrible. He loses a fight if he only gets 3 takedowns. The way that this guy fights, because he takes you down, you get back up like 5 seconds later. Like he never really holds top position. I'm gonna go with Merab. I think Merab gets like 5 to 6 takedowns in this. Keeps it relatively competitive on the feet. Maybe some standing cage control, which stinks for DK purposes. If he's going to be really, really owned on DraftKings, though, like I'm not sure he's going to be like, we're not going to get like his 140-point performance in this spot. Like Jose Aldo's takedown defense is very, very good, and he'll be lucky. Merab will be lucky to kind of, hold him up against the cage, kill some time, control him that way. Hopefully try to gas Aldo out a bit, who can slow down if you really fight, if you make them fight at a really, really high pace early. I'm picking Merab, but I think, what is his ownership? He's probably like 40, 50%.
Yeah, I got him at 40.
I think
that might be low.
I think he's a decent ownership fade, to be perfectly honest. I think it's a bad matchup for what he usually does. Like people are going to see that like he scores just absurd number of points every single time he's out there. This is a matchup where he's probably going to have more of a floor type, like in a win. I think Merab has more of a floor type of performance, which, his floor was the Dodson fight where he got 2 takedowns, 74 fantasy points.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it on a 13-fight card like this. I don't see him getting I don't think it's going to end up like Marlon Moraes or Casey Kenny even. Like I think he gets takedowns. Maybe, 4 to 6, but I think he's not as great of a play as 40% ownership would indicate. So, I'm going to avoid this fight a little bit. I think he's just a little bit too chalky.
I definitely think that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry.
And I've been thinking about doing that as well. Just because it is kind of like that Dodson fight where I just don't see Merab having a ton of success with takedowns. And if he is going to go out there and score 74 points, that's probably not going to cut it. But at the same time, I don't think you could beat Aldo with only landing 2 takedowns in a fight like you can against Dodson. So he's going to have to go for it a lot more in this fight. And on the Aldo side, I think the only ceiling for Aldo would be a knockout in this fight. And he's plus 350 inside the distance. I had him as a little bit too high on 27%. That's, maybe I'm high on the projection, but I just think that's That's way too high for me to want to get any leverage on. And I'm just going to go ahead and fade Aldo, take the chance, hope that he doesn't get a first round knockout, because that's what's going to really kill me. I think, numbers wise, Merab can keep up with Aldo on the feet just because he's always doing something. He could throw enough strikes to where he's matching Aldo in the numbers, but that's just not going to cut it. We saw Rob Font almost double up Aldo on the numbers, and he's still clearly lost because he's getting, the damage points. When Aldo's landing, it's a lot cleaner, and that's how it's going to be in this fight as well. So I am going to be on the Merab side, but I'm not looking to bet his, minus 146 or whatever we're at now. The way I want to get my investment to Merab is always on DraftKings. So he's had that 74-point win. That was his only bad score. And technically, he had 2 losses in the UFC. He scored 73 and 99 points in those 2 losses, which is just absurd. People just can't do what Merab does, go for 10-plus takedowns. He has 63 takedowns in 9 UFC fights. Here are some of his, all of his good DraftKings scores. He's got 164, 108, 148, 136, 124, and 129. That is what we call DraftKings gold right there. And you just can't get that for $8,200. So I think even though this is a much tougher matchup, it's not likely that he's going to get the 120 plus points. At $8,200, man, I have to take my shots, and I might be overweight to that 40% just because we don't get that often. And if Merab's going to win, it's going to be a lot of that wrestling success, spending a lot of time in top control, and he's probably going to score over 10x in the process. So I'm going to be on the Merab side. I'm going to fade Aldo, hoping that it doesn't bite me. But I remember watching that last Merab fight, like probably throwing my hat off, thinking it's over. He's getting knocked out in the first round, and I got no Marias at all. But he scored 164 points in that matchup, so it ended up being a good night. But I think we'll have a lot of those same worries in this fight here.
Yeah, it could get real greasy. But, that was, the most magic Marlon Moraes performance of all time. Guy's super, super dangerous. Cardio falls off a cliff. Him and Aldo are really not all that different, except Aldo's cardio has been criticized. It's not anywhere near as bad as Magic Marlon Moraes, who's a super fun fighter, retired now. I'm not taking shots at him, but yeah, I mean, I could see it. I like Merab as a play. I just think it was kind of more of a thought of ownership.
Yeah, and I mean that's really the question: is how often is he going out there and scoring enough
points? Lineups, so then I have to put 2 of 3 lineups on Merab, and then I've left. If he gets knocked out in round 1, if Aldo connects, or if Aldo's just able to extend him out and he only gets 3 takedowns, 66% of my investment is pretty much down the tube on a guy that is 40% out. Well,
I definitely don't hate that thought at all. And I wouldn't talk you off of going 0 out of your 3 just because, as you mentioned, he's 40%. It's not like you're being a whole lot different by using a Merab here. So I think that makes a lot of sense, especially if you see him struggling with takedowns. Even if he goes out there and gets a win with, 3 or 4 takedowns, it's not going to cut it at the ownership that he's at. And you can go with the Stars Scrubs approach, have multiple people that score over 100, over 110 points on this card. So definitely not against that. It's just, I'm always on Merab. It's just a long-term DraftKings Merab play for. I don't care what the name is on the other side. I always want Merab exposure. All right, let's go to the one I missed. We got everyone's favorite fight: Tyson Pedro minus 730 against Harry Hunsucker plus 530. We have an insane minus 1400 that the fight does not go to a decision. Harry Hunsucker's never even been out of round 1. In all 8 of his fights or whatever it is. And I'm going to pick that trend to continue here. How about you?
I mean, it's tough to, to support Harry Hunsucker in any way, shape, or form. I did yesterday on Dogger Pass podcast. I caught the top of the number. It was Hunsucker by TKO/KO plus 2,500. It's plus 1,600, 1,900 in other spots right now. I put $40 on it because I was like, it'd be kind of cool to win $1,000 on an MMA fight with such a small small investment. Like now I get people like on Twitter being like, man, Harry Hunsucker is going to die. I'm like, I totally agree with you. It's 25-1 for a guy who basically either wins in round 1 or gets finished in round 1. I would not touch his money line. I think, as I said on the show, he's got the word suck in his name. Like this guy is putrid. He's awful. But 25-1 for him he's going to come out. He's going to throw bungalows. Maybe eclipse Tyson Pedro. That being said, on DraftKings, I think it's much more likely Tyson Pedro takes him down super, super early. He's a guy who actually likes to lean on his grappling a lot more in general. And Tyson Pedro takes him down, fishes for a submission, and likely finds a first-round submission. Probably super high owned. He's obviously the most expensive guy, but it's like if you compare like actual odds that are out on the market versus, versus DraftKings price, I guess Tyson Pedro, because he's a minus 800 favorite in this spot, and he's just slightly more than the other people, he's probably a value. I've never seen a 1.5 round fight with like minus 400s out there for under 1.5 rounds. Like absolute absurdity. I think Pedro absolutely rolls. I think he finishes. I think he finishes in round 1. Betting perspective, they've literally cut your knees off from trying to make money on what seems like a setup fight. He's as high as minus 250 to win in round 1. So yeah, the only thing that I actually have invested on it is Hunsucker round 1 KO plus 2,500 as a bet. Pedro, how could Pedro not be a good DraftKings play? I'm not going to play Hunsucker on DraftKings, so I think he just gets absolutely flatlined.
Yeah, the only issue is that he's the most expensive guy on the card, and there's a lot of people on this card who could score well. So I guess that's the reason not to play Pedro, but he is minus, I believe it's like minus 500 inside the distance. I'm not even seeing it. Minus 550 inside the distance. And as you mentioned, minus 225 to win in round 1. So they're giving him a 70% chance of winning this fight in round 1. You got to have some Pedro exposure just for those outcomes. But at the same time, it could be, he goes out there, lands 3 shots, and one of them is a knockout. And if it's not in the first 60 seconds, maybe he's not scoring enough points to outscore an Usman or a Maverick or a Romanov, something like that. So I do think for ownership reasons, we can get away from Pedro. And the way I bet Pedro, I took him today on FanDuel plus 400 submission. I think these other lines are a little bit more correct, so I don't hate that the plus 400. Just thinking from a Hunsucker point of view, like if you're on the bottom of Pedro and you know that you're not going to make this 3 rounds, you're ready to throw the towel in. I would much rather give my neck up than let this guy beat my head in until the ref stops it. So I feel like anytime they give you a big gap, like if you're going to bet Pedro by knockout, you got to pay a lot more to do that. But plus 400 by submission, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I went ahead, put a quarter unit on that just in case. But I just think that this is a fight that you can get where you want it. Get where you can afford it in DraftKings. As much Pedro as you can afford, go for it. And at the same time, if I'm making 150 lineups, I want some Hunsucker exposure, because if he's going to win this fight, he's going to score over 100 points, and he's only going to be owned by less than 10% of the field. So if you can somehow get a first round finish from Hunsucker, not only are you competing with less than half the field, but you're also killing off more than half the field who will have dead Pedro lineups in their lineups. So I just load up on this fight. I would want to be a little bit overweight to Hunsucker if I'm making 150, but if I'm making, 10 or less hand-built lineups, I don't see me getting there because it's just not likely that he's going to get the win. Give me Pedro in round 1 by submission, hopefully. All right, next one we got Paulo Costa, minus 360 against Luke Rockhold, plus 295. We haven't seen Rockhold in a long time, and when we did see him, he was getting knocked out, badly, somewhat easily. Like his chin just does not look like it's been there. Now he's getting older, coming back with a chip on his shoulder, thinking he deserves a title shot with a win, but at the same time bashing the new UFC owners. I don't know what to think of Rockhold. skill wise, like if we're turning knockouts off, if this is a video game, we're turning knockouts off. I'm all about Rockhold in this matchup. I think he can definitely strike with Costa over the course of 3 rounds. And I think his big edge in this matchup would be on the ground. If he can go out there and get takedowns, I think he could dominate Costa. I don't know that he can get the takedowns, but if he can, I think he could do a lot with them. And he has a really high ceiling with those takedowns as well. He's got a high ceiling with a knockout finish. If this fight did go, we turn knockouts off and we get a 15-minute striking match, just neither one of these guys is going to score enough for the optimal lineup. So you would just fade in that scenario. However, we're not turning knockouts off, and I don't think Rockhold can stand up to the power of Paulo Costa. I see a Paulo Costa first-round knockout in this fight. I mean, if that happens, he's going to score well. If he gets out of the first round, I'd be a little bit worried about the Costa score, but that chin against that power is just not a good matchup. How do you see it going down?
Yeah, I mean, Rockhold's been off for a long time, so maybe it helped his, shake the cobwebs a little bit. Sounds like he's been doing a whole bunch of mushrooms. I don't know how that works for brain trauma, but I think they use it to like cure that type of stuff a little bit. I'm only half joking, but he was talking about using a whole bunch of mushrooms. But yeah, I think the big thing for me is that like on Instagram, on Twitter, it's like Costa looks like the Vettori fight. Like he showed up, he didn't care. He was kind of clowning around the entire time. He looked in horrible shape. He let himself get really fat in between. It's like these old dudes looking shredded coming into this fight. Like I think he's kind of, realized that's like he was kind of letting a good thing go away. Maybe he got a little bit depressed after Izzy knocked him out, but it seems like he's kind of got his shit back together now. I hate like minus 400s are out there right now. The money line is getting like almost unplayable at this point, but 8,700, I think he wins in round 1. I think he wins a round 1 knockout. So yeah, Costa for me. If Luke Rockhold beats me on DraftKings from getting taken, like Rockhold was a guy who wrestled with wrestlers and like went to like that camp to learn from those guys. He wasn't like a collegiate wrestler. If his game plan is to wrestle, I imagine like at least early in this fight, it probably is to try to take Costa off his feet. Then so be it. But like I don't think Luke Rockhold's wrestling is anything Paulo Costa's not ready for, and I don't trust Luke Rockhold's chin with a 9-foot or a 10-foot pole. Costa by knockout. Hopefully in the first 2 rounds. On Prize Picks, they had that number set at 10 minutes, and we were just smashing the under, parlaying it with a whole bunch of other things. It's at 7.5 minutes now. It's moved, so a little bit less enticing at that price. But yeah, Costa knockout in the first 2 rounds is kind of how I see this fight playing out.
All right. Yeah. I actually did a play on Costa on Underdog Fantasy, which is similar to Prize Picks. I don't think Prize Picks is legal here in Indiana, so I haven't been on that yet. But if it is, I would definitely like to try it out. But the last I checked, it was not. And I had, what was it? I believe it was under 58.5 significant strikes for Costa.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, I mean, it's not going to take him, 58 strikes to knock this guy out. And Rockhold hasn't been hit 50 times since
I think
since never. I mean, so I just feel like take the under on Costa strikes, and it just makes a lot of sense. Even if it goes 3 rounds, he might not give 58 strikes, but at the same time, I would expect a knockout to come well within 58.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty. That's a sharp side to be on there.
And then, yeah. Just on DraftKings, I would much prefer Costa. I mean, he's got a minus 165 inside the distance line, plus 165 wins in round 1. You're really chasing the round 1 knockout. You need the round 1 knockout, but I just feel like it's so likely it's going to happen. And we got minus 280, minus 330 that the fight doesn't go to a decision. Mm-hmm. I think around that 75% range is how much of this fight I would want in my lineups. At least I'm not even against an all-in because I don't expect a 15-minute striking match. I just want to load up on both sides, and I'll make sure to get Costa. Like if I'm making one lineup, Costa is much more likely to make that lineup. But I'll make sure to get some leverage to him where I'm not exactly sure where I'll be at on the Rockhold side.
Makes sense.
All right, final fight of the night. We got champion Kamaru Usman minus 360 against Leon Edwards plus 295. This is a rematch from back in the day. It was only a 3-round fight back when Usman only knew how to wrestle, really didn't have any striking game at all. And he scored 114 DraftKings points in that 3-round fight. Now we got an extra 2 rounds to work with. I mean, now he's got a striking game. He's got a high-pace striking game, which I don't think Edwards can match his pace. And he's also got, probably the biggest power in the division at this point as well. And I don't think Edwards can match his power either. I think we're turning KOs off. We're turning wrestling off. Then Edwards can hang in there in a striking match. Maybe he can knock out Usman. I think the knockout is what puts Edwards in play this week because that's what's going to give him a high score. But I just don't know that he's likely at all to win a decision here, and he's going to be a little bit too owned for my liking. So I'm going to fade one of the main event fighters here in Edwards, which always makes me nervous because they get 5 rounds to work with. I mean, technically, a lot of people will say he's the better striker of the two, which I would just disagree on. But I have him at, over 20%, closer to 30% ownership in this one, 27%. And I just don't want any leverage to that. So I would rather fade it than get leverage. And Usman is my favorite play on the card. I would rather lock him in than to get any leverage on the Edwards side. So I'm going to be loading up on Usman here. Even if he's not going for as many takedowns as I want, he can score well in a striking match, especially if he's getting some knockdowns in there. I think he's in play for a knockout as well. I'm cool with 100% Usman, to be honest with you. I don't think I'll go that high because there's so many favorites on this card that I like, but he'll for sure be my highest owned fighter on the card. Probably, 3/4 of my lineup, something like that. And I expect him to roll here. I actually think that there's value in the current line, minus 360. I would favor him at least minus 400, but more like minus 470, I think would be the correct line in this one. But how do you see it playing out?
I mean, I'll give Leon Edwards some his due-daps, I suppose you could say, a little bit here. It's like I think his wrestling has really, really improved since then, but I don't think he's really going to be able to stop the takedowns. And you said a lot of the things that I'm basically going to echo here myself. That it's one of those situations where, he already got 114 points. He got 6 takedowns the last time that they fought. Now you add an extra 2 rounds. Usman's got 150 point upside. He's lock button in. Edwards could maybe potentially knock him out, but I mean, Edwards by knockout is going to be super, super wide. Usman has been very, very durable. He's been in there with some great, great fighters. Edwards inside the distance, plus 550 I see is the widest line out there. So I still wouldn't even I don't even rate him to win that way. I think if he does win, it's that he's able to outstrike Usman on the feet, maintain distance. I suppose it's a slightly big cage, and not let Kamaru. Kamaru may have to do some of that holding up against the cage, foot stomp game that we saw against George Masvidal if he's not able to secure takedowns. But the guy's a cardio machine, fights at altitude. He's been training at altitude with Trevor Whitman recently. It's everything. I'm sure Kamaru Usman was just oh, we're going to Utah. Yeah, I train at 5,000 feet as it is. Let's bring the Brit. If we're actually going to fight him, let's bring him over to altitude because he's already it's the same. It's the level playing or it's the same playing field for him. He's already accustomed to fighting at altitude. He's a cardio machine. I mean, everything points toward Usman. So it's don't overthink it. He's 9,100. Just, you're basically just avoiding him getting knocked out, which is plus 600 or so. And I don't think that's going to happen. Usman, you just lock him in. I think he outscores everybody up top. His ceiling is, of course, higher than anybody else. His ownership is going to be high, but if it's only even 60%, it's I really struggle to see in a 5-round fight, unless he gets knocked out, how he doesn't score over 110 in this spot.
And he scored 195 DraftKings points before, which is
if you don't have him, and he wins in like a 5-round decision where he scores like when he gets like 8 takedowns and like 150 significant strikes, it's like, well, you might as well light every single one of your lineups up because you're dead. You are drawing dead at that point.
No Usman, no cash.
He's the clear slate breaker on this card. Now, maybe people playing 150, I understand the argument, but like 20% for Edwards seems pretty high. It's like if he's spending a whole bunch of time off of his back, he hasn't shown much of like a submission game off of his back or anything. Like he needs a knockout, first round knockout. So 20%, like I know people love targeting main event fighters, but
yeah, that's why I got so high because it's the main event.
Yeah,
but I mean, Edwards has never landed 100 significant strikes in his entire UFC career. And he almost got knocked out by Nate Diaz at the end of their last fight. Like if Kamaru Usman is landing that shot, Edwards is sleeping for sure. So I just don't really see many paths to Edwards in this one. I've always liked Edwards. Edwards cashed a lot of tickets for me. He's a really exciting fighter, really good striker. Worked on his I've never seen anyone improve their wrestling as much as him from the start of their UFC career to where they are now. Like he came in with zero wrestling, and now he can out wrestle most of the division probably. Just not Kamaru Usman. I think Kamaru Usman's the best pound for pound fighter in the UFC. Core play for me this weekend. I expect over 110 points on DraftKings. I'm looking forward to it. But to end every kill shot podcast, we pick a kill shot on the card, somebody we think will be a little bit lower owned. That could be the key to the optimal lineup this week. Hopefully help us hit that 200K. You got somebody in mind for us this week, Paul?
I think when we talk through it, I think it's Maverick. She's half the ownership of all the other people. She's already beaten this exact same girl in round 1. She got 4 takedowns against a striker, a heavy striker in her last performance, got 110 points. And everyone, you only have so much salary. It's really hard for people to mix her in and skip over the Romanovs and even Pedro up top. It's like, if you want Usman, you can't have Usman, Maverick, and Pedro without doing really, really absurd things with the rest of your lineup. So it's like, I think she has a really good chance to outscore Pedro. I think she has a really good chance of outscoring Romanov. Like Usman, I think is clearly the best play, but 60% ownership, everyone thinks he is. I think, relatively low-level women's fight. Everyone's going to probably avoid it for the most part, but their past history doesn't lie. She also trains in Denver, Colorado, so if it does get extended, she should have the cardio to hold up 15 minutes and hopefully secure a bunch of takedowns. Yeah, my kill shot is Miranda Maverick. Oof.
I like it. And I know our DFS Army members like these kill shots as well. So maybe you upped her percentage a little bit just by picking her as your kill shot, because I know they like to use them. But throw your kill shots in the comments. I'd like to see them. Just make sure you're not giving me any Usmans or Romanovs or Marabs, anything like that. Give me somebody who might be a little bit overlooked. I am going to go with Daniel Da Silva, a.k.a. Daniel Lacerda, just for the ceiling. This is a kill or be killed fighter, and I'm hoping he gets the kill instead of gets killed this weekend. And if that happens, I think he's a legit kill shot as an underdog who could score 100-plus points. Don't feel good about it, but he's going to be my kill shot this week. Thanks a lot, Paul, for coming on the show this week. I really appreciate it. If you have anything you want to promote, the floor is yours.
Yeah, check out the Dogger Pass podcast every single Wednesday. Releases around 7 p.m. Eastern time. Me and Cody Saptic been doing it for like 10 years at this point. Check out Mayo Media Network. When I'm not hosting the Dogger Pass podcast, I'm doing all of Pat's shows as well, which, that's why I call myself a producer, not a host half of the time. But, I mean, I get to talk about sports and work on sports for a living. Life's pretty good. Can't really make any complaints. Thanks for having me on. Feel free to, invite me back if you thought I was a half-decent guest. Obviously, I'm not some sort of like super sharp when it comes to DraftKings, but I thought we touched on some good things. You talked me into Maverick, and like the more I think about it, just like we've already seen it, Young can be exploited on the ground. So if she loses, I'm going to probably blame you. Maybe not publicly on Twitter, but like I'll mutter underneath my breath. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Feel free to reach out anytime you need a guest.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'll definitely, I mean, don't tempt me. I'll hold you to it. I know the people would love to have you back on. But yeah, thanks again. It was great having you on. As he mentioned, go check out the Dogger Pass podcast. It's definitely one of the best podcasts in the game, and they've been doing it for a long time. I watch it basically every week. Sometimes if I'm a little bit too busy, I miss it, but I try to make it a point to watch the Dogger Pass every week. And all those Mayo shows are good. They got the challenge shows, which I've always been watching. That's my like guilty pleasure show is the challenge.
I love it.
I like that they put those out. There's not a whole lot of shows like that. But ultimately, Dogger Pass, go check it out. I know you guys will love it. Good luck this week, Paul. Good luck, everybody listening. If we're not, winning that 200K, I hope that one of you guys is. Good luck. See you guys.